Oh, am I live now? Oh, what's going on? I just, gosh, botched this. So I'll just go play this again. Oh gosh, didn't know that was doing that. Bit of a glitch there. I think that started hiccup. It's only 10 minutes. All right, I'll start again. That's only 10 minutes. I don't mind listening again.
Hello everyone, this is Amirm from Audio Science Review. We're back to basics today on a concept and terminology that I'm sure you've heard a ton about, and that's blind testing and control testing in audio. The video was prompted by someone sending me this
blind listening
Paul McGowan from
and such, and of course using the laptop here at the moment. Using the laptop, I noticed that when the laptop is not laying against a flat surface, because the loudspeakers for the laptop are underneath. So if I put this laptop, listen to the sound.
Reason and methodology and proper methodology.
And I'll move the laptop away from the wall.
Prior to this, we had also
level sound changes. So I'll just put my hand underneath a speaker to amplify the sound, because realistically the laptop has to lay against, because they're very small speakers on these laptops.
Produced such a video for us, actually showing us this blind testing, which he unfortunately never done. Even though it's been a good few months since he
I'm just gonna
made that
put my blindfold on, double blind listening.
I'm not trying to complain about
no, I'll just keep the light on.
Get rubbed the wrong way
so you see light and shadow and such. So I'll just put that on just so I'm meditating, listening.
The topic they're talking. It's one thing for individual audiophiles to not understand the nature of these tests. It's entirely another when you have a company, you have resources, you have money, and as Paul said, the future of your company may depend on it. That you want to understand these things and do it right. So let me tell you up front, the punchline is that nothing they're doing is valid. No results they're generating is useful. They're really wasting their own time doing those tests. But let's get into it, and I'm going to cover this sort of A to Z, independent of just the mistakes they've made. Let me start at top level, and really this goes to the heart and the mission of what we do on Audio Science Review, which is to produce reliable results in whatever we do, whether I'm reviewing equipment or I'm listening to something. What is the point of producing something where I tell you X is equal to W, but it's not a reliable thing? You need to be able to demonstrate that what you're saying is true beyond just spitting out an opinion. And if there's also not reliable, don't say it on this thing. So this is key thing. Anybody can do any kind of test, generate any kind of result. But if it's not reliable, if it's not dependable, it's of no value. It's remarkable how many people get this wrong online in reviews, and in this case, industry people. So let me step back and say the proper terminology in here is not a blind test. It's a control test. Blindness is just one of the tools we have to build a control test. What is a control test? In a control test, we're trying to isolate everything else that is interfering with the results that we want. In case of audio, our number one goal is fidelity, and we may be comparing two products against each other. And the main thing is the sound that comes out of these audio devices, right? Whether they look different or price different or design different, all of that is secondary information, which unfortunately can pollute and bias the listener and have them vote improperly and incorrectly. If the only thing that matters are your ears and what you're hearing, then we need to create tests where that's the only sensory input you're getting, because all other sensory input are non-audible aspects of the test, and we don't want those interfering, because the moment they do, we're not talking about just the sound anymore. We're talking about a combination of things that just not useful. And I don't need to tell you that this is a standard protocol that's used in everything out there where people want to get reliable results on this thing. Medicine, of course, a prime example, but even taste tests on this thing, and food and drinks and what have you. As I alluded to a little earlier, blindness is one aspect of developing such a controlled test. And by blinding, we take away the identity of what you're listening to. And that is so important because, no matter who you are, you can't be influenced by, the shape, size, brand, or more importantly, just literally cheat. If I tell you this is a $10,000 deck and this is a $20 deck, and you're inclined to say that $10,000 decks are better than $20 ones. If you know which is which, all bets are off in this thing. So we apply a blinding mechanism, and this doesn't mean literally blindfold, although that can be useful too. But this is just one of the factors, and this is the most obvious factor everybody knows about, although it's tricky to execute. But at least I think anybody watching this video probably has heard the term blinding and knows that it refers to not knowing the identity of what you're testing. There are many ways we could do audio tests. The most common one is that we're interested in is you got two devices. One is A, one is B. Which is which? And I play a sample for you, and I say, you tell me if it's A or B. And you could guess A, you could guess B, and that's called a forced choice. You can't say W, right? There's only two devices, and you get to vote one or the other. I may ask you to rate a sound quality from 1 to 5, let's say. You could say 3, you could say 4, you could say 1, you could say 5, but you can't say 50. In that case, there are multiple choice questions in there, and you could get lucky by guessing, right? If it's A or B and I present you with some sample, you could just get lucky. Or you could think you know, but you really don't. But your guess is correct. And we need to be able to tell whether you truly are hearing something versus just a random guess. Now, in your mind, again, you may be thinking you're 100% not guessing and so forth. But from our point of view, the rest of the world that wants to listen to your conclusions of what you're claiming to be, that this amplifier sounds better than this other amplifier, if you want the rest of us to, we can't be in your mind, right? All we can do is look at the results of your testing, and we need to be able to tell how reliable that test is. If you go back to your days of being in school and taking exams with multiple choice, you guessed, right, when you didn't know the answer, and you were right. One of the things that also happens in audio tests is that when a person doesn't know the answer, usually they don't give up. They just sort of vote randomly. You just say, oh, look at that's A, that's B, that's C. Okay, I can't tell. I'm just randomly going to guess. So we need to find out about all of this, at some point, because again, if we don't find these aspects in somebody's testing, then we don't know how reliable the results are, and therefore we can't trust it or count on it. Now, what I'm going to explain to you is aimed at you individually, whether you're Paul or Danny or anybody who's watching this playing audio file, and you want to know the truth about audio. What is the truth about audio? Again, it's only the sound that you hear, not everything else that your brain knows about and can rely on. And for that, there are two ways we could do this. You could do it in a friendly testing, and the other one I call hostile testing. Hostile testing would be me going to Paul's facility and say, okay, Paul, you think you can tell the difference between this amp and this other amp? I'm going to run a test, and I'm going to put in all these protocols, and I'm going to be on the lookout for you being able to tell what I'm doing and not telling me how something sounds, but you're cheating and looking for tells, as it's called. This is not a presentation about that. That kind of protocol turns out to be very difficult to execute, and you need to have so many safeguards in there to keep the person from cheating and getting reliable results. This one is, if at all I've enticed you to do a proper objective test of by listening of audio equipment, and learn for yourself whether there aren't any differences. So that's the aim of the rest of this presentation. Doing it for formal research, publishing papers, and so forth. That requires far more than what I'm going to talk about, although the core principles are the same. But in this case, I'm just teaching you what to do in taking a test and generating reliable results, which you can, by the way, come and then say on a forum or a YouTube comment, say, hey, I've taken this test and here are my results, and have people say, okay, those are something we can pay attention to, rather than, listen to this amp, the other one has better sound stage than the other one, and this one has, harsher highs or whatever, that kind of thing we just dismiss out of hand because, again, it's not a controlled test. So, we need to make a test blind, right? That's the first thing we talked about. And the key thing in here is not knowing which is which. And if you can't do this, then don't bother, right? We've got to avoid, if you're testing two different things and comparing them, we've got to hide these things. One way to do it is to use an electronic switcher of some sort, and an A/B switcher, and you don't know which one is A and which one is B. Have somebody else come connect the cables, let's say testing cables, and then you can flip A to B. A lot of people will say, I don't want to have a switch in the path in there. That is on dissociation. Fine. Have somebody that you in your household or friend or loved one. Switch these cables. You can turn your back and have them switch it, and then then you can listen to the system and and write down and listen and then pass a judgment on it. The key here is to avoid any tells. And tells is just something that basically gives that away. You're doing this testing for your own good. You're trying to learn something. Don't fool yourself. Don't try to cheat. The temptation is high when you're taking these tests and you get frustrated. Maybe I could tell one was a little louder or whatever. But the whole point of this thing is you've got to not be able to tell the identity of these things. But again, I'm hoping that you know what blinding means in general. The next one is familiar to many people also, although executing it correctly is not easy. We've got to match levels. Levels have this incredible effect where you can literally enhance the fidelity of one device versus the other, even if they're 100% identical, by having one be slightly louder. What does the loudness do? Loudness lets you hear lower notes that decays into nothing. If the volume is low after, let's say it's a piano note or a guitar pick, and go ding and goes into noise floor and disappears at some point. But if I have a higher level, then it takes it longer to decay down. And that's an example of something that's very enjoyable. Bass that's impactful, that's louder, and kicks harder. If it's louder, then it's going to sound good. Until it gets distorted, then it does the reverse. But assuming it's not getting distorted, I can't tell you how many times I have fallen prey to this. Despite everything I know, if I don't get the levels 100% right, I'm listening to an A/B test. I'm like, gosh, it sounds better than the other one. And then I measure levels, notice that was louder. As soon as I compensate, it's like all of a sudden the door closes on you and that difference vanishes so remarkably. And you turn up the volume and all those characteristics that you read in subjective reviews come to life. Everything sounds more alive, details get better, noise floor goes down because there's more accentuation in dynamic range. So absolutely critical that you have to match levels. And unfortunately, this is a bit technical on this thing. And I'll talk about it in a second, but you've got to do this. If you can't do this, then don't do the test. And this is one of the things that Paul did wrong in his test, where he didn't talk about matching levels at all. Fortunately, a lot of the blind tests you can do without worrying about levels. And that's what I call the easy case in here, where the device themselves and what you're testing doesn't either impact the levels, power cables, or tweaks, or stands or footers, or there are a lot of things that basically cannot and will not change levels. Now, it's good to also check levels anyway. It is, but it's not always necessary to match levels. Two digital cables, I was going to say two streamers, but streamers can also resample audio and things like that. So there's a remote chance levels may change. But maybe you're lucky, and a lot of the fights we have in audio is around things that are basically impossible for them to make any change, and they're really not changing levels. So even if you think they're changing levels, so I personally would be okay if you have this class of device and you don't say anything about level matching, because if the levels are changing, then game's over. It did make a difference on this thing. Now, if it's two different devices where levels could be different, two different DACs, there's no standards in digital to analog converters, preamps. In audio in general, we don't have many standards that people stick to for levels. It's easy to find two DACs that one outputs 4.4 volts, the other one outputs 3.9 volts. Or even more extreme, there's a core DAC that puts out 3.5 volts or something like that nobody uses. But if you compare it to a DAC that puts out 2 volts, well, clearly it's going to sound a lot louder than the other one. Now, on these things, there's also the divided into two categories. Some of them you can level match, and I'll talk about how you could do that, but some of them you cannot easily level match. I often do headphone amp tests, and I get a tube amp which has a high output impedance. The problem with a tube amp or any amp device with a high output impedance is that if you hook them up to a headphone that has variable frequency response, which is most headphones, the two interact, it actually changes the frequency response of the headphone. If it's going to do that, then how do you adjust levels? Maybe it just boosts the bass, but not the highs. Or maybe it mixes both of them. Some of the frequencies go down, some of them go up. There is no one thing that you can match. And I tell you, in those cases, it can be next to impossible to match levels. So how common are those tests? I don't know. But if you have a high output impedance device, be careful on that. So let's talk about the middle category, which is an easy way to test things. You have two DACs, two preamps, two power amplifiers, something that can have variable outputs. Somehow find a way to run a test tone, and you can download test tones from the web or use programs like Room EQ Wizard and create tones in there. Fidelity of it is not critical whatsoever. So if you have a laptop or tablet, whatever, you could just hook up an analog output out of it or headphone out from dongle. It's really not critical. Take that cable and hook it up to your system and play the two devices. And if they have volume controls, adjust their volume controls till they match. If they don't have volume controls, then it gets a lot more complicated, and I'm not going to dig into that. But you got to find a way to adjust this. Now, how do you measure it? You can buy a multimeter, and these multimeters are as cheap as $30, $40 for a half-decent one. And make sure you use a low frequency. Pick 200 hertz here. There's nothing magical about that, but don't go much above that. Many of these multimeters, especially cheap ones, have limited bandwidth, so and it can be a little bit unpredictable what they measure above their bandwidth. So pick a lowish frequency and run it, and you basically put it in AC range, and hook it up to the output of your devices. Test one, measure that. It doesn't matter what it is. Let's say it's an amplifier, measures 6.2 volts. Okay, take it out and hook it up to the other one and measure 6.2 volts. Make sure you don't short things out. Amplifiers should have protection circuit, but that's the one device you could damage if you don't know what you're doing. With amplifiers, you could also use acoustic matching, where you can use a microphone, and then you don't have that issue, but that gets more involved on this thing. One more advice: after you do this matching, play some music and do the A/B test. Make sure they sound similar to you. I've done this, and then, like I said, in the case of high impedance devices, I go play some music. Some of them sound like the levels matched. Then I play others, and the levels not matched. So make sure subjectively, which is the test we're going to run with our ears, make sure they do sound similar in level on this thing. If they're not, then that's no good. Things get a little bit more complicated if you want to do these tests properly, and a proper one, science says you want to have a fast ability to switch from one to the other, and I'll talk about the improper way for you in a second. But the proper way is, how do you have two simultaneous things playing? If you're testing two preamps or two power amplifiers or whatever, those are analog devices, and you can get splitter cables and split the signal. By the way, on all these things, if you run into problems, just post on a forum, whether it's Audio Science Review or any other, people will help you with these things. Testing digital devices is more complicated. Let's say we want to test two DACs. There's a great tool on Windows I use, which is my Roon, R-O-O-N, Media Player Roon, that I use, and it has this multi-zone capability where you could have as many DACs as you want, and you can group them together, and then you can play the same content to all of them. And that works very well for testing two DACs. So I can take two DACs, gang them up together, and then anything I play gets fed to both of them, and I can then have an A/B switch on the output of the DACs and listen to them. And if the DACs have volume controls, I adjust their volumes. And if they don't, in software and Roon, I can adjust their volume. Roon lets you have independent volume controls there too. And makes a very difficult job doable. Now, there are people who don't believe in this fast A/B switching, and they think they should spend hours and days and weeks and months listening to one sample, then listen to the other one. No problem. There's no requirement in control testing that anything be done fast. I don't recommend that you spend days listening to one then the other. It'll take you a long time to finish this test. But surely, if the difference is available to you night and day, as people always say, oh, I listen to one DAC is grainy, I listen to this cable, so much better background and everything. Well, if it's that obvious, then you don't need days to listen to it, right? But you're welcome to do a daily listening test. Listen to one of them for a day and then listen to the other one for another day. In that case, you're just switching gear and just get a friend or a loved one to come and do the switching for you, so it's blind. So you don't know today, on Monday, you have DAC A or cable A playing, and the next day could be A again, or it could be B, and you basically, once a day, you're listening to one or the other. But through that, science has conclusively proven that when you do that, you're really screwing yourself. There's no way you're going to remember what the sound was like, 5 minutes ago, literally, versus, 1 to 5 minutes. But control testing and blind testing doesn't dictate this. A lot of people say, well, blind testing says I got to do it quickly. It doesn't. It take all the time in the world, and the results will be just as valid from point of view of running a control test. This is the reason I actually made this presentation, this slide. Up to here, a lot of you knew what I was going to talk about. But this is the part that I find that most people don't understand. And if you don't do this, unfortunately, the results are no good at all. You could match levels, you do everything else I said. If you don't do this, it's wrong. Remember, I talked about how we need to tease out whether you're guessing or whether you were confused, whether you couldn't really tell, because the answer is always multiple choice on these things. The answer to that is statistical analysis. And to have statistical analysis of anything, we need to have more than one sample. If I flip a coin and I predict that it's going to be head, and it's head, does that mean that I can predict the outcome of any coin flip? The answer is no. That was a lucky guess, right? Let's repeat that 5 times. I flipped the coin 5 times. What if I get all 5 times right? Does that mean that I can predict that? Answer is actually no. For that to be correct, you need to get a little over 8 out of 10 times right before we have 95% confidence that the outcome is reliable. So if you're comparing 2 cables, comparing 2 DACs, 2 amps, or 2 of anything, the classic A/B test, then you want to run the test minimum of 10 times. The more you do, the better the statistics are. But for my sake, if you ran it 10 times and you got 9 of them right, good enough for an online internet argument to come and say, like, I tested these 2 things, and 9 out of 10 times, my guess was correct of which one I was listening to. You get that, that's cause enough for us to stand back and say, whoa, there may be something here. Let's repeat the test. Let's see if we get the same thing. But if you come out and say, hey, I can walk into a room, listen to these two things, instantly I can tell which one's A, which one's B. That means zero, means nothing. If you did it twice, it means nothing. It means 3 times. And this is Danny Rich's mistake. And his
I'm going to go to the
I
kitchen
can walk in instantly, tell what the
blindfolded and have a Pepsi.
Maybe you do, maybe you don't. First of all, we weren't even there to know.
Do the blindfold Pepsi challenge.
One of the things about statistics is that you keep on, and that is the documentation.
Yes, because I know that's because I know the surroundings of my home. But that doesn't mean, you know, I know roughly the footing.
Show us a log like this that says, hey,
so just
first time I got it right, second time I got it right, third time I didn't, fourth time I did, fifth time I did, sixth time I did. And then we can see.
So just make sure I'm fully blindfolded.
Some confidence to us that you got it right. So
make sure I got a Specsavers.
Number, but personally, I like to get 99% or 100%
I need to get some new ones.
I don't even want to leave 5% to chance. So I'll often take a test where I get 24 out of 25 times correct. And then I know. And then what is the one time wrong? Because, you know, sometimes you're voting A and B, you forget or you get distracted when the differences get small. It's very hard. And I've shown you previous examples.
I think I need to turn this way out. Just make sure.
Test like FUBAR's APX test.
I know there's a door in front of me, so I'm just going to put my hand out. I don't want to bump into the door. Where the bloody hell? Yeah.
Right doesn't do really good. And by the way, where does this come?
Just go very slowly. I can hear my cat meowing.
50% chance of being right.
I don't know why I'm turning the light on, so I'll leave the light off. Don't know why I'm turning the light on. It's just instinct. Just going along the wall. Oh, I can hear my cat meowing. I've got a near bloody blow me and blow surround. Move it above. Move it below. I think I'm in the kitchen. Okay, I'm in the kitchen.
Where you're rating the fidelity of speaker.
Just move a little bit close, slowly, because I'm going very slowly. Inches per second. I don't know why I'm closing my eyes a little bit still when I've got the blindfold on. I mean, it's just something weird.
And then we can actually tease out.
I just get that out of the fridge. I'll just put this down.
Against the music they listen to, you can actually tease out the probability of chance.
I think my telescope's over here nearby.
So there's good tools to do that. But I'm not going to get into how you do that. You need to really have a good background.
Just leave that there for a second.
Now, go and get any paper from Audio Engineering Society, in case of audio, but also any medical research, any
Have I got a glass?
You see that the testing
my glass is
really
in
like
there.
half the paper or 1/3 of the paper.
I'll be back. Let's go with the laptop.
What I'm showing you is research from Sean Olive, Dr. Sean Olive on preference testing. It's just a random paper that I took. And you can see all the statistical analysis.
Just go and get my glass.
Here. And not just one test, they'll run many statistic tests to find. For example, maybe people prefer the speaker with certain tracks of music or with all the music or listener types, male versus female, old versus young, and so forth. So you can really dice and divide the results and get a lot of insight out of the test on this thing. So when somebody tells me that they just walked in, did 1 or 2 tests, tells me that they've never ever seen a single piece of research paper in audio listening test.
Okay, I'm pretty near to where.
I thought that 1 or 2 iterations was good enough to say that I can pass a blind test. And how embarrassing is that you're in the industry, that you
go very carefully, get my glass. Oh, bingo.
That you talk about blind testing, that you haven't even seen or read one paper, because you can't escape this. Every paper that has a blind test in it has multiple iterations in statistical analysis. Every one of them, without exception, from simpler papers to journal papers that are peer reviewed that go on for 50 pages. They all do. So when a person
going very
says,
slowly.
I know it all.
I'm going inches per second, not foot per second, going inches per second. So if I go any faster, I'll bump into something. I think I'm near to the door here now because I can hear the open sound. Oh yeah, there's the climbing cat climbing through.
Download a few papers. Just go in there and search for blind test control.
I know I've got a chair in the way of the door, so I'll just go around that. I'm in the kitchen. Oh, I've got Magic meowing below me because I can feel his tail. Oh, I've got bear hair on the. I've got bear up here. Hang on, put my glass down.
If you want to do this
not sure where it is. Where's the Coke? But where's the Pepsi?
Is, if it's something you do longer term, is to keep.
Oh god, it's a bit awkward.
Doing this switching.
Let me just put this down so I've got two hands.
Sometimes they switch, sometimes they don't. There's random number generators online that you can use, and create a sequence of A, B, and it could be A, B, 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 A, whatever. It should be randomized. If it's not randomized, you're actually violating some of the principles in statistics that lets us do the math and throughout the probabilities in there. So you should randomize that. And so they keep a log, and let's say you're doing the test for 10 days in a row or 10 times in a row. They have their cheat sheet, and you take a log and you write down your answers. And at the end, you compare the two and see how many you got right. And if you didn't get 9 out of 10 right, I'd say, you just learned something important about audio that you didn't know. Now, this gets confused also. Danny Ritchie in his video says double-blind tests and speaker cables are impossible because the person doing the cable switching will know what he's switching. Therefore, it's impossible to run a double-blind test, and the people who say you should run double-blind tests are stupid. Well, first of all, let's talk about where did this double-blind test...
Okay, I'm going to take this off now.
Google Clever Hans, and you'll find in a Wikipedia page a very interesting story about this horse. German, you think, was Clever Hans.
And that was blind listening and walking around. Because I know the surroundings of my home. I know the sound, the acoustics of my home. So that was blind listening, walking around with a blindfold. Of course, I'm walking around like this. Because I've got to go very slowly. If I walk around at this speed, blindfolded, I'm going to bump into this, bump into that. Trip over a chair. Oh yeah, and I did feel something below me. A tissue came out. I thought I felt something underneath my foot. So yeah, I'll take a Mia's blind listening test any time of the day.
So psychologists studied this.
Oh yeah, psychoacoustics. Are we talking about psychoacoustics? Psychology of hearing, how we perceive perceptions, hear sound.
When his owner was there, if you took away the owner and asked the questions, the horse couldn't get any of the right answers. And he realized what was happening was that the horse was watching the owner, and the owner was making involuntary gestures when the right answer was given by the horse. So the horse would say 4, and the horse would do 1, 2, 3, 4. That's to give the right answer. Involuntarily, the owner would change its, what he was doing, and the horse was able to read that, and it would stop pounding his hoof, and that was enough for it to get all the right answers. So this gets us to this what's called Clever Hans effect. And this is basically why single blind tests are no good, because if you are conducting a test,
so
you could have
is that a single blind test? And that's a double blind.
Verbal communication with a person, or in this case, an animal.
Or does that mean I get one of these, I put that one over, I get a second one and put that over? How about a hood?
If I have DAC A, I'm playing, and I say, now let's listen to DAC B.
And when I was walking around blindfolded, I was closing my eyes also more or less at the same time sometimes, because it was just something, I don't know why, it's just closing my eyes also. So that was double blind, I suppose.
I could convey the answer to you, which is which, and we don't want to do that. So the solution to this is double blind, which means in this case, instead of the owner and trainer,
I don't think someone
asking,
double
there,
blind
have
should
him
be using
behind the
an
horse,
oscilloscope or a voltmeter.
Now, performing double blind
Unless, of
tests,
course, it makes a
gets very
bleeping
difficult,
sound or
like
such.
Danny
But you
said.
got to know
You
what
have
sort of
somebody
bleep
switch cables
sound.
that,
You know,
where they don't
I'm
know
guessing they
cable
may
switching,
make
you can't blindfold them
instrumentations
and
that
switch
make
cables.
certain
Actually,
tone
probably could if you
sounds.
made it easy enough.
So you know this
You could make
is
an electronic AV switch
or
that's
ones that
automatically switching
have
on the computer control, so that becomes
verbal
random.
sound or such.
Or in my
So it
case, I
says
actually don't care if you do that
240
rigorous
volt,
procedure. Remember, this is for your own learning.
and you know
This
it's
isn't
240
published
volt
something. So as far as I'm
or
concerned,
whatever.
if you have a loved one come and switch A to B, and then they walk out of the room, and then you turn and listen to your system, that's fine that they knew, as long as they didn't communicate anything to you. So that's the key thing, making sure whoever's doing the switching for you, whether if it's a computer is done
Pepsi
for
chat,
you,
the
as a
Pepsi
person,
blind
just make sure they don't
listening
communicate anything to
challenge.
you. And if we have to literally double blind, put the blinders on you, we could also do that. Then you can't see. It's key that there are no sounds. Somebody's plugging a cable and sounds different than the other. Again, don't try to fool yourself. These are for friendly tests. If it's a hostile test, we have to do a lot more. So I'm happy with single blind tests with the intent that is doing what a double blind test would do. It's not an excuse to not do any testing because you can't do double blind. And understand that this is the nuance between single and double blind. Don't call everything double blind. I have people say, I do double blind tests all the time. And when they explain it, it's clear they've done a single blind test, so it's not a double blind test. A simple thing I do is that when I'm testing equalization, for example, I close my eyes and I have my mouse on the on-off button. And I just hit it many times till I lose track of which one's which. Then I just switch A and B, A and B, A and B with my eyes closed, and then I open my eyes and see it. So that's not a proper double blind test, but it's good enough for the purposes that we have in here. Just quick, some FAQs before we finish. People say blind tests are stressful. They are if you've said, run a road runs uphill, and I'm not testing you.
Almost finished. So it's about 40-something minutes, I think.
So you're doing it in your home. If you can't tell at the end, you were confused, you don't have to tell a single person. It's for your own sake, and so therefore it doesn't have to be stressful. I do a ton of these blind tests myself because I want to know before I go write something and embarrass myself. I run the test. And
most times I'm blind listening.
Yes, it's something
most times I'm blind listening, so I put the test equipment on because I'm curious about something, because something seems out of place. Something seems,
some control to it.
On
this thing. So
and I and then I can visually see that. Right.
But I have passed.
I knew I could hear it, but where it roughly was, where is it roughly located at, and then use the test and then right now I see it. Correct it. Listen again. That's better.
But this other one I could. And so
that's all it is.
Good listening. You learn a lot about audio, by the way, by doing these A/B tests. You actually become a better listener because you're not focusing to pass a control test where you know the results coming back.
I mean, testing
right
the test allows speaker.
Is that, I can't go too fast.
You got to go from testing the loudspeakers. Components.
Take all the time you want in the world. Know that you're screwing yourself. Every test in the world has been done. The moment you let people get acclimated
on test equipment,
differences shrink, and even when we talk about speakers and things, the longer
our frequency range, our frequency response goes like that.
If you want to do that, go ahead. We give you
up to 20,000 kilohertz if you're very young, or if for some bizarre reason, and you're this what age and that, and you can still hear 20,000 kilohertz. I think audiologists are going to be rather baffled and scratching their head thinking, how's that possible?
We don't care what to tell yourself. We care what you want to come and tell us and what you want to push down our throat by saying, You better believe me that this cable
And then
sounds better.
they realize you can still hear up to about 21,000 and 22,000. And they're even more baffled. Thinking, blimey, this individual's got the hearing of a blooming cat.
We just want to know the sound.
But he can't go any higher.
So get into the
But they're still baffled.
Get used to talking about and asking people, we want control tests. When somebody comes in, just tells you, oh,
anyway,
maybe the other one doesn't sound plausible. So okay,
because your hearing rolls off at round about 15, 16, maybe 17. Your hearing rolls off.
And if you can't get
our hearing range rolls off.
Get this every 2 or 3 days. Somebody comes in our forum and says, "You're all wrong. I got this Ethernet switch."
So it's like having a microphone.
Ethernet switch. It's like
looking at a sine wave tone from a speaker, and then you purposely put a crossover filter on where you just a minus 6 dB, and you set the frequency back at, say, a certain frequency, maybe 2 kilohertz. Play a sine wave at 20,000. It gives this reading. Put the filter on, right? And then, boom, that frequency goes down. Maybe not there, it probably goes down a little bit lower. It depends. It just drops right down. Turn that filter off, boom, and then the frequency comes back up. Can we hear it?
If something's not plausible.
No, it's maybe not very, maybe not so very well. And we don't usually hear fundamental sine wave tones on a daily basis. There's sounds out there that may produce something similar, but not, you know,
the rest of us who go by logic and
not
what we've been taught in all science.
Not that you're going to notice, because everything's random. Everything's random outside, and you've got to have test equipment outside. No one's going to walk around with an RTA all the time checking everything now, are they? What you can hear on a daily basis out in the real world, where these sounds will be at real world. They're not, most of them are not generated by man-made devices. Some of them are nature, some of them are man-made.
Some small percentage of you are inclined to now go do it, and you now at least know that the things you got to get right. Maybe you don't know.
20,000 is not going to be very easy to hear now.
Membership is happy to
averagely we probably only hear up to about 8 kilohertz.
That's a very difficult test to run, but whatever you
unless
do, you need
you're going on certain things or going around on certain things, buses, traffic, whatever, blah 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 blah. You may be listening out and you think, oh, you hear a high pitched squeak or whatever on a bus or something. When the brakes are braking, you hear this just audibly because it's on the outside mostly, and you can just about hear it, or whatever else, and you think, curious what frequency that was. It most likely be very audible frequencies because it's partly audible. If it was a tone that seemed like wow, and you pull a face like crikey, and it was almost like you didn't really audibly hear it, but it reached a level where it bent your ears, or pinching. It's a pinching effect, like pinching. It presses down against the ear membrane, and the odds are there, if you notice something like that, it was probably well above 10,000 kilohertz. Because it would be not very audible, but you'd notice the sensation of the pressure. And it's not really good because you can't really mess around with tones like that too much, because otherwise you can give yourself HF, hearing loss. if they're done at soft levels, or so to speak, it's okay. Extreme high levels, no. Measuring all these DA, what you call them, DACs. Sounds like something like Count Bloody Dracula, if you ask me. Drac. Sound like bloody Dracula. No, I'm not into that. Sound like it's going to be sucking the bloody dynamic range out of the bloody thing. I've probably got a DAC on the bloody Denon, no doubt. Not interested. Don't bother me. Don't bother me. Oh, what's going on? What's going on out here? All right, stop that shit. Stop that shit, all right? You had some biscuits. You had some food. Bloody, I think buying that bloody biscuit feeder. Oh, crying out loud. If I knew my cats were going to be at that biscuit feeder, pulling it apart, trying to figure out how it works, how the biscuits come out, when do they come out? Curious. Now they're trying to take the blooming thing apart. Oh, it's not an annoying sound. The fact is, it's they're trying to break it, you know. So it's like, what would you give a cat feeder? How? Oh no, my cat bear's on the bloody he's activated. Bear, will you calm the fuck down? Bear, calm down. Bloody hell. Calm down, Bear. Bear, come here. Come here, Bear. Come on, Bear. My cat Bear's going bonkers. He's going bonkers. He wants to go in the bathroom. He wants to go up near where the pigeon is. And, look at the pigeon. Pigeon's probably flying around outside. It's probably, but he knows there's a pigeon out there. What's up, Bear? What's up? What's up, Bear? What's up? Yeah. See? He can hear stuff. He can hear sounds, and he can hear mostly all the audible sounds that are in here. If I use the microphone to go around to see if there's any audible other sounds, like, I doubt it, because microphone's not going to pick up on EMI or RF. Need another device, but maybe he can sense EMI or sense RF. Curious. So they say cats sometimes can see things. I guess that's a thing for audio science review. The cats can see things. So they're like, what's going on out there? But yeah, you got to have test equipment when doing all these tests and such. Speaker cable. Anyway, like testing a speaker, I would test the speaker. I would start testing the components, and then I'll start the speaker drivers and such. and then test the passive crossover. And then, okay, testing the speaker drivers, that meaning I would have to test those speaker drivers and run a frequency sweep, or I can set the REM to a specific frequency on the pink noise, so it won't output any too much low frequency sort of thing, you know, so where, or a frequency below its so-called operating frequency capability, its tolerance range as such. I would output a signal, yeah, and test it that way on an amplifier that I know is a-okay with its frequency response, because I would test the amplifier on the frequency sweep electronically, and then I think, yeah, that amplifier is okay. Can you stop it there? Can you stop it? Stop it. Get down. Lay on there and stop making a noise. Wait. Calm down. Come on. Get down. Get down. Come on. Making a ruckus out there. So I'll test the speaker components, you know. I would test the bass driver at full frequency range, because it could go from the lowest up to the highest, where eventually it would frequency a roll off. I would test the mid-range driver relatively with a full range, and look at the characteristic. But I wouldn't test a tweeter at full range, because it wouldn't handle low frequency. That's obviously, but that doesn't mean you wouldn't be able to notice or see it, because it's still a moving, you know, it's a magnet, a phase the diaphragm, the voice coil, and it fits in place, and then magnetic field, and then you put signal through and you get sound. I would test it down to a certain limit, and maybe, you know, and just, or gradually gradually attenuate the frequency sweep, the pink noise, and adjust it so it goes down low, and eventually, and then I will see the roll off of that tweeter and see it going down, and I think, oh, I'm not going to go any lower now, I'm stopping there. Okay, and I think, okay, that's probably about its limit. Of course, I have a straight line up here, and I'll see where it's all kind of ripply with the frequency and such, and then I'll think it goes, and I think, right, I'll stop about that limit there, and then run a sine wave tone, a sine wave sweep, and start it at a certain frequency, just a little bit underneath, a little bit, slightly, few kilocycle back slightly, and then run the sweep, and then watch it gradually go through, and then I'll see something going up, and then it'll do all the wiggly things, you know, because it's going to have a certain, you know, characteristic. It's not going to be perfect flat now like an amplifier. Do the frequency sweep and it's like flat. My cat bear's he's on bonker mode. Bear, calm down. You want me to open the window and you can have a look outside? Yeah. I don't think so. It's freezing cold outside, so yeah. So I've never done an actual test with speaker components that in my own system. I haven't tested that theory. I haven't tested that yet. I could do something like on some other, you know, speakers and test and see what it looks like, because I'm kind of curious myself. And then you then of course, I test the passive crossover network. So I would connect up everything to the passive crossover network and connect it back into so it goes through my THX monitor, so it goes through the amplifier return, so it can then connect into the computer, so I can do a safe frequency sweep without blowing the computer to smithereen, and then I can see what the characteristic of the passive crossover is on the low, the mid, and the high range. And then with the data that I've got testing with the individual speaker elements, testing them without passive crossover or anything, just I would know what their characteristic then looks like, and then apply it to the crossover filter, and then put everything back onto the crossover filters, run the test again. So crikey, I'm looking at a tester going like 1, 2, 3. What are you doing, Bear? The fuck are you doing? Oi. Bloody hell. What is he doing? What is that cat doing? So I tested the speaker elements, drivers on their own, test the pad, put it all back together, test that again. I've tested the amplifier, so I know its frequency response electronically. Next one would be testing the actual drivers independently, one by one, inside the speaker cabinet, inside the box. I would put a microphone inside the cabinet, test, see what it's like on the lows. Typically, the mid-range and high range, they're usually housed in a separately. So sometimes a mid-range driver might be put in its own little enclosure or whatever. Sometimes it depends. But I would go through tests of, if I was into all this nonsense, I don't really give a fuck. What the fuck is my cat? Whoa. Wow. That was wild. He's a wild cat. He comes scooting out from back here, running down here, and then jumps up onto the cat climbing tree, and then grabs hold of it like he's bloody Spider-Man. Just jumps up and then... oh, goodness gracious. Yeah. Oh, here he comes again. He's running back in. You okay? He wants to go under there. He wants to go under there. He wants to go underneath there. There's something in the way there, Bear. Do you want me to move it out of the way so you can go underneath? Hey. Psst, psst. Hey, Bear. Psst, psst. No, he's not interested, bloody. Sorry, cat. He's really out and about today. Yeah, so I'll go through all those tests. And also I'll go through by testing the to get the frequency of the tweeter, the mid-range, the bass driver. I would test those, like I say, test them independently test them independently with the REM, and then have an equalizer that's going to flatten out some of the little uneven frequency responses on that individual speakers to get them as, if I want to tune it and get it near flat, this whatever, I will try and do that to explore it a bit further. I'll try and or try to get it flatter. Yeah, it's a bit of a risky thing, sort of thing, because you could possibly damage the components. Possibly. Anyway, that's something I've not looked into yet. Yeah, it seems interesting because that would be a long days of testing. Yeah, anyway. Now we're in the video, so I'll end the video. Boom, boom, boom.